referrals that are coming in from GPT are much more likely to convert. We've seen like a 3% increase in conversion rates from people who are coming in from LLMs versus people who are coming in from all the other organic channels. In B2C space, 3% is not a lot, but when you're looking at B2B with a customer value of 5, 10K or even more, that 3% is actually ending up increasing your pipeline with some incremental value that you wouldn't have unless it would come from a conversation. So in a nutshell, conversations that create money.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the OnBase podcast. I'm your host, Chris Moody, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Andreea Westenberg, and we're going to talk about the new roles of digital visibility. Andreea, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation. It's extremely excited to have kind of like a 2026 KPI met in terms of planning. So that's really cool, especially talking about something so interesting as visibility into the AI era.
Yeah, it's perfect timing, perfect topic. You're going to help me out a lot too. We're all trying to figure out what to make of this. Before we jump into it, I know we talked before we hit record, but we like to start with asking the question to tell us about your journey. And that could be any way you want to approach it. It could be personal, professional, a mix of the two. But what led you to what you're doing today?
Cool. Yeah. Let's see. Like, I feel like I've been part of the digital transformation before it was cool, before I knew that it was going to be like a digital transformation. And the whole part of like with my generation, the way that we grew up with this extremely fast development of technology. You know, I went from not having a phone home to basically being surrounded by technology every single day. I think the most important, one of the very interesting things is that I've been in tech in B2B my entire career, almost 20 years now, which sounds a lot rougher than it is. It started with literally PPC implementation. So basically search engine marketing, bidding on specific keywords, and now understanding how the PPC environment evolved, because that was kind of like the first AI adoption, with how Google algorithm and Meta algorithm is showing ads to specific people, to where we are right now in terms of AI and generative engine experience taking over a search engine experience, and how digital media is being consumed by not only humans, but also like machines, and how can people benefit from the specific machines. So I think it's really interesting, specifically because when you're in the technology, you don't necessarily see the changes because you change with them. So it's a lot easier to be, a new adopter of anything that is coming in from AI right now, but in past, mobile, digital transformation and so on. So it's not as scary to be inside it as it happens than just like watching it from an outside and trying to understand what is going on with the industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. You and I have both been in very similar spaces for 20 years, which is crazy to say out loud. It goes by so fast. And I know you have a journalism background too. And I think that is really helpful because you're used to finding the story or what to pay attention to or what will other people care about. What are the early lessons about visibility, data, or storytelling that you think hold true in today's AI first marketing world?
That is so interesting. I actually went to school to become a journalist because I thought that it's going to be more into a writing career. It doesn't happen. But ever since I started working, there's been, conferences, events, everybody was talking about the same thing, content is king. So I've been hearing the same thing, content is king, for, again, 20 years. And now it's really interesting because the idea hasn't changed. Content still is king. It just shifted a bit. What is the type of content that we have to put in on the website to make sure that people are finding us where we are, right? So this is where kind of it's still the same lesson. Content is still king, but it really depends on what type of content, because, we're looking at ChatGPT, we're looking at any other language model that you want, and you can see that they're producing content at a much faster rate than any human can. Now, the conversation becomes, is that content something that is really going to get the attention of our users? Is that content as it is right now? Can we just put it on the website and hope that it's going to convert? And convert meaning, it's going to create pipeline, it's going to create at least leads, if not MQLs and SQL if we want to go like super specific. And ensure that the answer is no. But what shifted the conversation is that it's even more interesting and important now for brands to bring value, which is kind of like the keyword that we have right now for branding and for digital management in 2025, 2026. What is the value that we are bringing to the people that are coming into your website? What AI has done is slightly changed the rules of content a bit, because right now we're not only producing content for long form content, a huge blog post that people can read. It actually has to be structured in a way that people can come on the website, get the information that they want in like 5-10 seconds, and then continue their journey inside your website, hopefully convert. And on top of that, we also have to optimize for these LLMs. So we want to make sure that the content that we are putting on the website, again, is written in a specific way that makes sense for machine learning. And that means having titles that actually answer questions that are informative. So when like having titles that actually can mimic the way people search on search engine results page, right? Like for example, what is the map? To be able to give like an example that that's obviously like, something very top of funnel. So how does the demand base use intent data? That is actually a good type of blog post. And then you have to give people the information in the first paragraph, and then you go into structuring the other information with bullet points. So it's not necessarily about the type of rules are kind of the same. The guidelines and the nuances have changed a bit, but in a nutshell, it's still content is king, bring value and not just volume to the people that you're getting on the website.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned ChatGPT and Perplexity too. And I know that this comes up a bunch on the podcast. We hear from folks where their CEOs are asking them about AI SEO. I know there are new acronyms now too. But that's a hot button topic. I think every executive is thinking about how do we win in this new form of SEO. But what are some of the misconceptions you see most often when people talk about AI SEO?
That it can replace strategy. If I'm going to like emphasize it in a nutshell, I mentioned before that, it can create volume, but it cannot create value. So it cannot replace your strategy. It can help you get there. It can, maybe we were mentioning bullet points, right? Like create an action plan, but it will never replace somebody that actually knows how your people are converting. And apart from that, it also changed a bit how we are looking at website traffic and website data, and what are the key indicators for success that we want to have. Because right now we're not only talking about, we're looking at zero-click SERP, zero-click websites. So we're not looking into how many clicks to the website do we have. We're looking at things like time on page, which is a very good indicator of value, because if you're bringing value to your user, it means that they're actually sticking around and reading the whole thing. And as a corollary, there is also scroll depth, right? Like, are they looking into the website and consuming the content that you're bringing? So it all comes down to the whole like strategy thing. It will never, I cannot say never. As of right now, it does not take over a strategic view of where a specific company, especially like a B2B company and this like extremely, red ocean, where we want to be in the future. If we're thinking about, this November, before the podcast, we were talking about 2026 plans, right? It won't take over the way that a strategic view for any sort of department needs to be created for 2026, right? That still needs to come from a human, but AI can be one of the tools that help us get there.
Love that. I'm curious too, looking forward, kind of trend casting for 12 months. How do you anticipate Google, OpenAI, and Perplexity shaping the new discovery ecosystem in the next year? Because you did talk about top of funnel and some of the searches that would come up. But how do you think that's going to change over the next 12 months?
Okay. I can tell you what I'm seeing right now, which is going to be a big conversation of trust. But also the second point, which I want to I'm telling you now, because maybe we can go back to it, is in the more like the e-commerce space. So that's actually being developed. And the way that things are evolving right now with the speed, I'm actually expecting the second one to become more ingrained into these models. But let's chat about trust a bit. I can't necessarily quote surveys, but let's just say like the adoption rate, I think is pretty high, especially in terms of executives that are using any sort of like AI model, right? So what I've been seeing is that people are using them conversationally. When they're using I don't know, ChatGPT in a conversational way, the way that the replies end up being more personalized to the user. Along with personalization comes an issue with trust. So we already have kind of like a trust buildup between the user, which is an executive, let's just say like in a tech company, and the LLM model, right? What happens when an executive trusts something? They're more likely to buy from that specific recommendation, right? So I'm trying to understand how many people are chatting to Perplexity about my specific product. The way that I'm seeing them right now, I'm seeing them as referrals if people don't drop their UTMs, right? So I am able to actually understand how many people and for what topics are actually landing on my website from these types of chats, right? So that is a very interesting way that it's shaping consumer behavior because people, I feel like they're starting to be more prone in buying after having a conversation with ChatGPT. Now, that opens up a lot of can of worms because I've been an adopter for ChatGPT for like 2.5 years now. And I think it's gotten a lot better. But in the past, it had a lot of hallucinations, and I couldn't necessarily trust, because we were talking about that. I couldn't trust what they were saying. But now the trust is being built, and the less hallucinations and the more tailored the content is, the more prone people are going to be to buy following that referral. So this is one. The second, again, like I started my career in PPC. Basically, I'm used to like spending money on Google mostly. So I'm really waiting to see how these models are going to monetize, not only as a freemium, because right now they're kind of like a freemium. You pay, you get more conversations, you get more messages, and so on. I'm also trying to see if they're going to allow some sort of ads, some sort of referral links, and so on. And I feel like ChatGPT has started doing that with a Stripe integration. So right now, I think people can buy from Etsy directly from ChatGPT. So that is obviously a B2B conversation, but I'm waiting for them to be into the B2B space, right? Because that's going to solve, you're like GEO admin and you're looking for your specific products. You don't necessarily know what's going to fit because you have very specific issues that you can either start a conversation with a company that is going to immediately try to sell you something, and you're only going to have that company's perspective or that SDR's perspective, or you can start a conversation with Claude and you can, after, I don't know, an hour, you can have a plethora or whole plethora of options of different companies that might help you with your problem. Right now, what I'm seeing, at least in terms of the referrals that are coming in from ChatGPT and so on, these people are much more likely to convert. I've seen kind of like, if I remember correctly, I think it was kind of like a 3% increase in conversion rates from people who are coming in from LLMs versus people who are coming in from all the other organic channels. And, in B2C space, 3% is not a lot, but when you're looking at B2B with a customer value of, 5, 10K or even more, that 3% is actually ending up increasing your pipeline with some incremental value that you wouldn't have unless it would come from a conversation. So in a nutshell, conversations that create money.
Yeah. I like that a lot. I've had a few use cases where I've gotten close to that with various tools. One, I was trying to do some video editing. Both of my boys play baseball. So I had highlights and I wanted to trim a clip. So I was trying to use AI to say, hey, of all the videos in this folder, create a highlight reel. And it was like, yeah, I can do that. And then it never did. And it said, actually, I need a tool to do that. Here are 3 that I recommend. Would you like to sign up for one of the 3? And I said, sure. So I pad through, signed up, and then it still didn't go through and complete the task. So it was not quite the experience I wanted, but I can totally see the near-term scenario of starting a demo or starting a trial directly from the conversation that one might be having. I think that's really interesting. And it leads to the next question, too. So, for all the leaders
Okay.
who want to future proof their visibility strategy and do it as quickly as possible, what are the practical first steps that you recommend?
Get your team to update the schema markup. So basically any sort of content updates, any sort of updates that you're doing on the website, just make sure that it's machine proof, right? Not just human proof. So if you're updating a piece of content, if you're updating a page, just make sure that this is going to be included in the update and the schema markup. So get your SEO or GEO people onto that. Apart from that, I would also say take a look at share of voice, which is so hard to measure. We have external tools right now that are giving so many different results, but there's also like the middle. So the middle ground. What I like to see is not necessarily the actual number of where I'm sitting in terms of share of voice, but what is the trend line. So basically use whatever share of voice I had in any of the tools that I used last month and see if it's increasing or decreasing or staying flat. So just take that as a baseline, regardless if you believe that it's, 5% or 15%, or if you actually have like a very big company that in your space is becoming bigger.
I like that a lot. And, we've had episodes on zero click and the ability to get AI overviews and information before you ever click to a website. So, this is one that comes up a bunch. We talk about it internally too. Websites are still extremely important. You just talked about content updates and things we should do, but how should we be thinking about the role of a website in today's customer journey where many folks are using more AI tools to support their research process?
Right. So first I would say, what is the purpose of the website? And right now it's still kind of like end-to-end funnel approach. It's still kind of like a presentation and then discovery, consideration, and go into conversion. It can, but with what you're saying, like with zero clicks, I feel like it becomes more a conversion path. You should update, because we were talking about content, all this. If you update the content following the new rules of GEO, which is EEAT, expertise, authority, trustworthiness, because we were still talking about the trust issue, right? You should have enough hits to your website, but coming in maybe from other points of view, not necessarily only from Google. Plus, one thing that I'm kind of like not happy about, we cannot track AIO, impressions, overview impressions in Google Search Console. So making that not necessarily something that can be tracked directly is hard. So coming back to the point, what is a website? It's more like it should be an instrument for conversion. So I would highly encourage people to do some CRO optimization tests in terms of in terms of CTAs, maybe sticky CTAs to some specific pages, heat maps to understand what happens with people's interest once they actually land on the web page. What are the entry pages? What are the exit pages? Again, we chatted about time on page and scroll depth, which are really cool indicators in terms of interest and how valuable the website is. And just like don't make people spend too much time if they want to convert, right? So I would completely audit at least what types of forms, what happens after people fill in the forms, because we're talking about B2B. So it's not necessarily going to be a plug and play and people who are buying the product from the website. Just make the whole experience as feasible, as like easy as possible, without headaches, without having to fill in all the contact details, just like have a very good lead scoring model and experiment with any sort of bottom of the funnel elements that we might find on the page. And that includes, again, where are you positioning your call to actions? What type of call to actions make more sense? And these types of tests don't necessarily have to take over the whole world. Once a month, if you have enough volume, which means enough traffic, you can experiment more often. If you don't have that much traffic, meaning 10,000, 20,000 visitors a month, you're not going to have enough volume. So you might not be able to replicate as fast as possible, but it's still going to give you an idea of how the people are behaving on your website. What is the behavior that leads to conversion?
Absolutely. And you mentioned experiments and testing.
Yeah.
So I want to pull on that one more. As you've done experiments with AI driven creative and with optimization, I know you've done optimization probably a billion times based on your background. Where are you seeing meaningful performance gains?
Can I give you an example from the PPC era?
Yes, that'd
because
be perfect.
it's really cool. So at a company that I was working on, we had like a lot of volume in terms of not only ad spend, but also like the types of creatives that we would put into market. And that sort of novelty is sometimes really hard on the creative team because they cannot iterate so fast that the system allows it. We've been trying. The creative team has experimented with. I don't believe it was necessarily Midjourney right back at that specific time, but it was definitely some sort of AI that would create images, right? So we don't want to go into ad fatigue, which is a completely different conversation, right? You don't want to have ads that are basically looking the same for like 6 months, year, or even more. But we also know that you cannot, again, like ask your creative team to constantly iterate. So what we've been doing is using AI to constantly get us new visuals. It wasn't obviously you have to have the human element because it wasn't a plug and play. But what we found is that specific algorithm, specifically for the Meta one, really likes to optimize by freshness of creative. So it was kind of like a low hanging fruit, if you want to call it like that. The fresher creative and the more that you innovate your creative, kind of like, every 2 weeks, every month, you would have better results, which means at the bottom of at the end of the day, you would have your dollars spent better because the system would prioritize your ad because it was newer, right? So I've learned a lot from this test, not only the actual results, but also it's not a one size fits all because we could not replicate this in Google Ads for display, for example, right? It's just not how Google AI is working, nor did we replicate it, for LinkedIn, which is a completely different story in terms of what creative we have to have. So the idea is that we can use this. You still have to have a human element, but it's really easy to use AI to iterate and to give you faster results than you could possibly humanly have. And that's basically, the conversation that we had in the beginning with content. Like AI can write an absurd amount of content. You just have to human proof it.
Absolutely. Let's talk about success. So it doesn't necessarily have to be ROI, but you hit on share of voice. That is a difficult metric to track. What are the leading indicators that you recommend for dashboards to give executives confidence that they're starting to get ahead of these shifts and not reacting too late?
I would say consistent results then can be scalable and replicated. So if you're seeing, let's just say in my example before, you're seeing a better conversion rate from a specific LLM, if you're seeing the same trend for 2-3 months in a row, that you might be onto it, right? So what I would do then is just try to replicate that specific page to another product. If you're, working for an umbrella company that hosts different types of product, and see if the customer behavior is the same. So in terms of dashboards, that would be one of the metrics to use consistent results, no matter where the path of the entry path is. If you can scale it, if you can replicate it, then it's something definitely that is good to have. And apart from that, what are the key indicators? Again, like I feel like AI is changing a bit where we're looking at. We can still look at traffic just because, again, like we don't have AI overview, impressions and AI overview, except like as a direct metric as of right now. That's kind of like something that we get to measure through like third parties and so on. But it would be something like, direct traffic, just to understand how is your brand performing. The idea is that if you have AI overview impressions, then people know your brand and might just like hop on your website without necessarily following a referral click, right? And all the other things that we talked about, like time on page, I think it's so important for value.
Those are great recommendations. We have a few quick questions to close this out today before we run out of time. The first, you've been around the block in tech, and I'm always curious, how do you personally stay current and avoid shiny object syndrome as our field evolves so fast?
Okay, good question. I think it has to do with what I mentioned before, like scalable and measurable. If you can get the same results and then you can measure them. If you have inconsistent results, then it's not something that there's something that might be put into the bucket of, hey, this is a new shiny, it's a new shiny object. Apart from that, let's see. I read a lot of case studies from similar companies that are more publishable on I guess LinkedIn is becoming an influencer environment, but it's really interesting to see what other companies that are in the similar boat as we are have done and what we can learn from them. And apart from that, yeah, I guess it has to do with the tech stack, because you cannot always jump on any trend if your marketing budget or your tech stack just doesn't support it.
We're gonna hit on two of those in just a second. So the quick hitters, tech and things you like to read. But the first, you can only pick one thing. So this can be a quick one. You don't even have to explain if you don't want. But what is the single biggest challenge in B2B marketing today?
Attribution.
Attribution. That's a good one. All right. We're surveying that one. So I think that's been a challenge. What, 20, 30, forever years? How many years?
I can chat about that to no end. I used to work, like, I've been in companies that had a very robust attribution model, proprietary. So basically, everything was built in-house, really cool. I still don't believe that we had the best results. Like, we follow that. So the way that I approach attribution, if we have an attribution model, is I like to do a lot of incrementality tests and a lot of like blackout tests. If you have, again, you need to have volume. If you have a robust marketing budget, you can do that. So basically just, stop advertising in 2 US states and then measure what happens to all your channels there. If everything falls under direct, if everything falls under organic, then you might not necessarily need to spend all those marketing dollars, because all the other channels might be just growing and you're only cannibalizing yourself if you're spending that. So attribution is really big. And there's also the issue with non-attribution in B2B companies which don't sell directly, which is a huge challenge, because then you have to do correlations, you have to be very creative, which is where you can fit, because it's really interesting to see like proxy metrics and so on. But it's really challenging to do just like shots in the dark, especially if you have a very long sales cycle, kind of like 18 months, which is the standard in B2B. So it's interesting, it's challenging. And even with what was going on right now with AI, I think it's going to become even more of an issue to have correct attribution. But the most important thing is to constantly measure it, constantly challenge it, and see where you're staying, and not just like take the results as they are. Basically, iterate and iterate. Basically, I would say at least twice a year.
Perfect. What are your favorite tools or technology that you're using?
It's gonna be very simple. I like the Google Suite. I like Looker Studio. It's extremely friendly.
Perfect. All right. The next is on good reads. This could be book, blog, newsletter, podcast, video. Doesn't matter. You talked about some ebooks and stuff too. What are your favorite reads?
Right now, I am getting my informations from some podcasts, generally speaking, whatever I can listen to. And I am following industry experts who have proven results. So if you want to say like influencer marketing on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the next question too. It's a beautiful segue there. Who are the people that inspire you the most in B?
Can I actually give names?
Yes, that's great.
I'm really following Aleida Solis, and I hope I pronounced her name correctly. She's really big in the SEO space, and I really love what she's saying. There's also Elena Varna. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing their names correctly. I just feel like the news and the way that they're presenting goes beyond what is a fad and might actually have like very informative newsletters. So I subscribe to their newsletters.
And we'll make sure we include those in the write-up. And then the last and most important question of all, how can everyone get in touch with you after this podcast?
On LinkedIn, easiest, digital native almost. So I'm kind of like, what is the sync that chronically online? LinkedIn/Andreea.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was really, really helpful.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.